Did you know that 90% of the world's billionaire wealth is built on secrets? But only one secret is powerful enough to grow gold from the soil of a cursed forest? We're told that success is about hard work, grit, and late nights. But for Alexander Sterling, the iron titan of the financial world, success was a harvest. While the world marveled at his meteoric rise, nobody dared to ask why his eyes looked so hollow in the glow of his penthouse lights. Alexander didn't build an empire. He planted one. And the roots were thirsty for something much darker than capital. This is the story of Alara, a woman who started with nothing but a patch of dirt and a botanist's curiosity, and how she stumbled upon the one thing that could bring a god to his knees. This is the journey of a beggar who became the keeper of a curse, and a billionaire who realized too late that you cannot outrun the debt you owe to the earth. Imagine this, a high-stakes boardroom on the 80th floor. Alexander Sterling stands at the head of the table, his face pale, sweat beading on his brow. Across from him sits Alara. She isn't wearing rags anymore. She's draped in silk the color of midnight. She slides a single shimmering golden leaf across the mahogany table. "The tree is dying, Alexander," she whispers. "And so is your empire." Outside, the stock market is crashing in real time. The invincible titan falls to his knees, not out of love, but out of pure, unadulterated terror. He realizes the woman he tried to destroy is now the only person who can keep him alive. But to understand the fall, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the private jets and the cold arrogance, Alexander was a man with a choice. And Alara. She was just a girl trying to save her family's legacy from being paved over by Sterling's bulldozers. She hated him. He despised her. Yet, in the humid, dangerous shadows of the Blackwood Forest, they found a passion that was never meant to exist, a spark that ignited in the one place where light is forbidden. You see, we love to watch the powerful fall. We love to see justice served. But what you're about to discover today will change how you think about success forever. You'll realize that sometimes the things we desire most are the very things that will eventually consume us. Before we dive into the heart of this incredible journey, I want to be honest with you. This video took over 40 hours to research, 15 hours to write, and nearly 30 hours to produce. From the folklore of the Blackwood Forest to the intricate details of Sterling's financial downfall, every detail was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication and love deep, immersive storytelling, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world to me and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. Before we head into the first chapter, I have to ask, have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything in a heartbeat? Is it luck, or is it something more sinister? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be hearting the most interesting theories. Now, let's step into the shadows. The gates to the Blackwood Forest are open, and the fortune tree is waiting to show the world. Alexander Sterling was a man who had everything, but to the forest, he was simply a man living on borrowed time. Let's look at the numbers because in Alexander's world, numbers were the only language that mattered. By the age of 34, he sat atop a net worth of $42 billion. He owned a triplex penthouse in Manhattan valued at $150 million, a private fleet of Gulfstream jets, and a reputation for being the most ruthless acquisition specialist on Wall Street. He didn't just buy companies. He dismantled them. He enjoyed the crunch of a hostile takeover. People called him the Iron Titan, a man born with a silver spoon. But that was the first lie. The truth is, Alexander grew up in the mud. He was the son of a disgraced accountant in the small, rain-soaked town of Oakhaven, right on the edge of the Blackwood Forest. He watched his father weep over utility bills and saw his mother sell her wedding ring just to put bread on the table. He hated the smell of poverty. He hated the way the rich kids at the local academy looked through him as if he were glass. One winter night, after his father was arrested for a desperate, failed embezzlement attempt, a young Alexander sat on the porch and made a vow. "I will never be small again," he whispered to the dark tree lane. "I will own the world that tried to break me." But while Alexander was building his skyscrapers of glass and ego, there was Alara. Alara didn't want to own the world. She wanted to save her corner of it. She lived in a crumbling farmhouse on the outskirts of Oakhaven, The very land Alexander's company, Sterling Global, had just earmarked for a massive industrial complex. To her, the land wasn't real estate. It was a living, breathing history of her ancestors. She was a botanist who spent her days documenting rare species and her nights fighting eviction notices. She was brilliant, fierce, and completely broke. Her bank account held exactly $412, and her car, a rusted 2012 hatchback, was held together by prayer and duct tape. Their first real encounter wasn't in a boardroom. It was in the mud. Alexander had returned to Oakhaven for a photo op to announce the new Sterling Industrial Hub. He stood there in a $3,000 bespoke suit, looking down at the damp earth with utter contempt. That's when Alara marched past the security detail, her boots caked in grime, holding a handful of wilted seedlings. "You're killing the soil, Mr. Sterling," she shouted. The cameras flashed. The press gasped. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a decade, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't greed. It was recognition. He saw the same hunger in her eyes that he used to have. But he didn't offer a hand. He offered a sneer. "The world doesn't need soil, miss." "Vance," she spat back. "Alara Vance." "Well, Miss Vance," he stepped closer, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. "The world doesn't need soil. It needs progress. And progress doesn't care about your weeds." That night, Alexander sat in the back of his Maybach, the leather cool against his skin, but his mind was racing. He felt a phantom itch under his skin, the kind you feel when a storm is coming. He looked out the window as they drove past the Blackwood forest. For a split second, he thought he saw a flash of gold deep between the trees. His heart hammered against his ribs. It had been 20 years since he entered those woods. 20 years since he found the tree that gave him his first $1,000,000. He had convinced himself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by childhood trauma. But as he looked at the silhouette of the forest, he realized the price he had promised to pay back then was finally coming due. Meanwhile, Alara was pushed to the brink. The bank had called. The eviction was happening in 48 hours. Desperate and out of options, she remembered the stories her grandmother told her. Stories about a golden heart hidden in the center of the evil forest. Never go there, her grandmother had warned. The forest gives with one hand and strangles with the other. But Alara looked at the foreclosure notice on her table and then at the Sterling Global logo on the news. She didn't care about the legends anymore. She grabbed her flashlight and a rusted garden trowel. If the billionaire wanted to play God, she would find the source of his power and tear it out by the roots. This is where the path splits. One person is running from a debt, and the other is running toward a miracle. Both are about to collide in a place where the laws of man don't apply. If you were born into Alara's circumstances, watching everything you love be erased by a man who has more money than he could spend in 1,000 lifetimes, do you think you would have made the same choice to enter the forest? Or would you have walked away? Let me know what you think in the comments. There is a moment in every life where the path splits, one leading to safety, and the other leading into the dark heart of a forest that never forgets a debt. For Alara Vance, that moment arrived at exactly 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. The rain wasn't just falling, it was punishing the earth. With her eviction notice damp in her pocket and her pride bruised by Alexander Sterling's public mockery, she stepped over the rotted fence line of the Blackwood forest. This wasn't just trespassing. This was an act of war against her own fear. The forest changed the moment she crossed the threshold. The air grew thick, smelling of wet iron and ancient cedar. Her flashlight beam struggled to pierce the fog, flickering as if the trees themselves were trying to swallow the light. Every snap of a twig felt like a heartbeat. She thought about turning back. She thought about the comfort of her small, failing farmhouse. But then she remembered Alexander's eyes, the way he looked at her like she was a stain on his expensive shoes. "I am not a weed," she whispered into the darkness, "and I won't be cleared away." Deep in the center of the woods, where the GPS dies and the wind stops blowing, she found it. The fortune tree didn't look like a miracle. It looked like a nightmare. Its bark was a bruised purple, and its branches twisted toward the sky like the fingers of a drowning man. But when Alara's light hit the leaves, the world exploded in color. They weren't just yellow. They were 24-karat gold, shimmering with a pulse. At the base of the tree lay a scattered pile of old, weathered belongings. A silver watch, a gold tooth, and a rusted signet ring with the letter S engraved on it. Alexander's ring. The proof was right there in the dirt. But as Alara reached out to touch a leaf, a voice boomed from the shadows. It wasn't a spirit or a ghost. It was the sound of a heavy boot snapping a branch. Alexander Sterling stepped into the clearing, drenched in rain, holding a handgun. "Get away from it, Alara," he said. His voice was trembling, a sound the Iron Titan had never made in a boardroom. "You have no idea what you're touching. This isn't wealth. It's a ledger. And I'm the only one who can pay the interest." The confrontation wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. Alexander explained the rules of the tree. For every golden leaf it grew, the owner had to sacrifice a piece of their humanity. Every million he made coincided with a person he betrayed, a bridge he burned, or a memory he erased. "I didn't choose to be a monster," Alexander shouted over a sudden crack of thunder. "The tree chose me. It saw my hunger and it fed me until I was full of nothing but bitterness." Alara looked at the gun, then at the tree, then at the broken man in front of her. She realized the source of arrogance was actually a source of profound, agonizing fear. Alexander wasn't arrogant because he was rich. He was arrogant because he was terrified that if he stopped being powerful, the forest would come to collect his soul. Then the ground began to shake. The tree began to weep sap that looked like liquid fire. It was reacting to Alara's presence. The curse of the fortune tree was shifting. It found a new desire, a new hunger. It didn't want Alexander's greed anymore. It wanted Alara's justice. In the chaos, the gun slipped from Alexander's hand. He fell to his knees as the golden leaves began to turn black and crumble into dust. Back in the city, at that exact second, the Sterling global servers began to crash. Millions of dollars were vanishing from his accounts every second. "Stop it!" Alexander screamed. "Tell it to stop. I'll give you the land. I'll give you everything." Alara didn't scream. She didn't run. She walked up to the tree and placed both hands on the trunk. She felt the surge of power, the cold, intoxicating rush of absolute control. She saw the vision of the future. She could save her farm, she could become the richest woman on earth, she could destroy Alexander Sterling with a single thought. But she also felt the price. She felt her love for the soil, her memories of her grandmother, and her very empathy beginning to chill. Alexander watched her, his face a mask of desperation. He saw the transformation in her eyes. He saw the iron entering her soul. "Alara, don't," he whispered. "Don't become like me. It's a cage. It's a beautiful golden cage." For the first time, the billionaire and the botanist were equals. Two people standing in the mud, deciding whether to be gods or to remain human. This is the moment that defines the rest of our story. Alara has the power to take everything Alexander owns. She can save her world, but she has to give up her soul to the same curse that ruined him. At this point, Alara had to choose between option A, accept the tree's power, become the new Titan, and watch Alexander suffer in poverty, or option B, destroy the tree, lose her land forever, and walk away with nothing but her humanity. What would you have done? Would you take the gold and deal with the curse later? Or would you burn it all down to stay true to yourself? This decision would define everything that came next. Let me know in the comments. I'm dying to see where you stand on this. When the root of your success is poisoned, every fruit you harvest carries a price that money simply cannot pay. The weeks following that night in the Blackwood Forest were a blur of impossible wealth and agonizing loss. Alara had chosen to take a single golden branch, not for greed, she told herself, but for survival. Within 48 hours, she had paid off her family's $280,000 mortgage in cash. By the end of the week, she had hired the most aggressive legal team in the state to stall Alexander Sterling's development project. She was no longer a botanist in muddy boots. She was a ghost in the machine of high finance. But the fortune tree wasn't a bank, it was a parasite. For every debt Alara cleared, a part of her world began to wither. Her laboratory plants, species she had spent years nurturing, died overnight. The local wildlife began to avoid her property. Even the air around her felt cold, as if she were carrying the winter of the forest in her veins. Alara looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She was wearing a $12,000 designer suit, but her eyes looked as hollow as Alexander's. She realized that by using the tree to fight him, she was becoming him. She spent nights sitting in her darkened farmhouse, clutching the golden branch. It hummed with a low, vibrating frequency that made her teeth ache. She was winning the legal war, but she was losing her sleep, her appetite, and her peace. Meanwhile, Alexander Sterling was experiencing the darkest period of his life. The curse didn't just take his money, it stripped him of his dignity. Because Alara had stolen the tree's favor, Alexander's empire was hemorrhaging value. His board of directors staged a coup. His $42 billion net worth plummeted to less than $5 million in a matter of days as secret offshore accounts were mysteriously wiped clean. He was evicted from his penthouse. He went from drinking vintage Bordeaux to eating lukewarm soup in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The public humiliation was surgical. Headlines screamed, "The Iron Titan melts. Sterling declared insolvent." One evening, Alexander showed up at Alara's gate. He wasn't the predator anymore. He looked like a ghost, thin, haggard, his designer clothes hanging off his frame. "You think you're saving the world, Alara?" he rasped as she approached the gate. "The tree doesn't want justice. It wants a host. Right now, it's feeding on your memories. Tell me, can you still remember the smell of your grandmother's kitchen? Or is it just the smell of gold now?" Alara froze. She tried to recall the scent of her grandmother's cinnamon bread, but all she could find in her mind was the metallic, sharp tang of the golden branch. A wave of pure, unfiltered terror washed over her. She realized Alexander wasn't her enemy anymore. He was her only warning. In a moment of desperate vulnerability, they sat on the porch of the farmhouse, the very house he had tried to destroy. Alexander confessed the true depth of his struggle. "I haven't felt a genuine emotion in 15 years, he whispered. "I thought I was powerful, but I was just a puppet for a hungry forest. I lost the woman I loved because I couldn't feel the warmth of her hand. I traded a soul for a skyscraper." Do you think Alara should have used the tree's power to save her land, even knowing it was changing who she was? Or was there another way forward? One that didn't involve becoming the very thing she hated? Share your perspective below. I'm curious if you believe the end justifies the means. But the struggle was only beginning. The legal battle reached a boiling point. Sterling's former business partners, men far more dangerous than Alexander, realized that the luck had shifted to Alara. They didn't care about curses. They cared about the gold. A mercenary group, hired by a rival conglomerate, descended on the Blackwood forest to find the source. They didn't know they were walking into a trap. The forest didn't want new masters. It wanted to be left alone to finish its meal. Alara and Alexander had to make a choice. They could let the mercenaries find the tree and hope the forest killed them, or they could go back into the dark together to end the cycle once and for all. "If we burn it," Alara said, her voice trembling, "I lose everything. The farm, the money, the legal win. I go back to being a nobody with $400 in the bank." Alexander looked at her, a strange, sad smile on his face. "And I stay a nobody. But maybe, just maybe, we get to remember how to breathe." They spent the next 6 hours preparing. Alara used her botanical knowledge to create a compound that would accelerate rot. Not for a weed, but for the most powerful organism on Earth. As they walked toward the forest edge, the sky turned a bruised purple. The wind began to howl Alara's name. The tree knew they were coming. It began to sprout golden flowers, an intoxicating lure designed to make them turn back. "We are standing at the threshold of the final act. Everything is on the line. The billionaire's redemption, the botanist's soul, and the fate of a town caught in the crossfire of an ancient greed. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. Your support is what allows me to tell these deep, complex stories. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the romance, the revenge, or the mystery of the tree? Let me know in the comments. The most dangerous thing about hitting rock bottom isn't the fall. It's the realization that you finally have nothing left to lose, and everything to prove. For Alexander Sterling, the transformation didn't happen in a boardroom with a signature. It happened in the passenger seat of Alara's rusted hatchback. The man who once controlled a $42 billion empire was now navigating by a cracked smartphone screen, helping a woman he once tried to ruin save a forest he once tried to pave. Something shifted in the air. The Iron Titan was gone. In his place was a man who actually looked people in the eye when he spoke. He stopped calculating their net worth and started seeing their humanity. It was a strategic pivot, not of finance, but of the soul. Alexander's first win in this new life wasn't a contract. It was a small act of integrity. A former associate offered him a black bag deal, a way to skim $50 million from a dying subsidiary and disappear to the Caymans. The old Alexander would have taken it without a second thought. The new Alexander looked at the bribe, then looked at Alara's greenhouse, and walked away. "I'm done building cages," he told his associate. For the first time in 20 years, his hands didn't shake. He felt a strange, terrifying sensation. Peace. While Alexander was dismantling his ego, Alara was building a new kind of power. She realized that the fortune tree didn't just grow gold, it mirrored the intent of the person holding its branches. She began using her botanical research to heal the land rather than exploit it. She developed a revolutionary, organic soil restoration serum based on the tree's unique cellular structure. Suddenly, the crazy botanist was being courted by global agricultural giants. Not because she had a golden branch, but because she had a solution. She was offered a $10 million research grant, clean money, earned through brilliance, not blood. But the shadow of the past was catching up. The rival conglomerate, Leadvance Holdings, had moved their heavy machinery to the edge of the Blackwood Forest. They didn't care about Alara's science. They wanted the anomaly. The antagonist, a man named Marcus Vane, who was even colder than Alexander used to be, unveiled a plan to clear-cut the entire forest in 72 hours. He was unaware that the source of arrogance was no longer a gift to be taken, but a trap waiting to be sprung. In a quiet moment before the storm, Alara and Alexander stood in her garden. The romantic tension that had been a flicker in the mud was now a steady flame. "If we do this," Alara said, looking at the dark tree lean, "there's no going back to who we were. You'll never be a billionaire again. And I'll just be a scientist with a very long road ahead." Alexander took her hand. His skin felt warm, no longer chilled by the tree's curse. "I was a billionaire for 15 years, Alara. And I was miserable for every second of it. I'd rather be a nobody with you than a god in a graveyard." The stage was set. Marcus Vane had the bulldozers. He had the private security. He had the arrogance of a man who thought money could buy nature itself. But Alara and Alexander had the rot. They had the serum designed to put the fortune tree back into the earth for good. They weren't just fighting for the land. They were fighting to break the cycle of greed that had haunted their town for generations. We are witnessing the birth of two completely different people. Alexander has shed his armor, and Alara has found a sword made of truth rather than gold. At this point, our protagonists have transformed into someone completely different. Do you think people can truly change their core nature? Or is Alexander just acting out of necessity because he's broke? Can a predator truly become a protector? Share your thoughts below. This is important because what happens in the heart of the forest will test if their transformation is real, or just a temporary mask. True power isn't measured by how much you can take, but by what you are willing to burn to the ground to save your soul. The final showdown didn't happen in a courtroom or a penthouse. It happened at the source. At the edge of the Blackwood Forest, the air crackled with a dry, electric heat. Marcus Vane, the man who stepped into Alexander's vacuum, stood before a line of high-tech excavators. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Alara's farmhouse, holding a tablet that tracked the forest's anomalous energy. He thought he was about to mine a miracle. He didn't know he was standing at the mouth of a tomb. Alara and Alexander arrived just as the first blade touched the cursed soil. They didn't come with lawyers. They came with a glass canister filled with a shimmering, milky white liquid, the rot serum Alara had perfected. Alexander stepped forward first. He wasn't the Iron Titan anymore. He was wearing an old flannel shirt and work boots, his face lined with the exhaustion of a man who had finally stopped lying to himself. Marcus Vane laughed when he saw him. "Look at you, Alexander. From the Forbes cover too. What is this? A gardener's assistant? I expected a fight, not a charity case." Alexander didn't flinch. He looked at Marcus with a pity so profound it silenced the surrounding workers. "I'm not here to fight you for the throne, Marcus. I'm here to tell you the throne is made of bones. You think you're winning? Look at your hands." Marcus looked down. For the first time, he noticed the faint metallic gray tint under his fingernails. The same tint Alexander had lived with for 15 years. The curse was already jumping hosts. The tree had sensed Marcus's superior greed and was already beginning to feed. "The tree doesn't work for you," Alara said, stepping beside Alexander. "It uses you to bridge the gap between this world and its hunger. Every dollar it gives you is a piece of your heart it turns to lead." "Lies!" Marcus screamed, signaling the foreman. "Rip it up. I want the heart of that tree on my desk by sunset." As the machines roared to life, Alara didn't scream. She didn't try to block the path. She knelt and poured the serum into the primary root line that snaked across the path. The effect was instantaneous. A sound like 1,000 windows shattering erupted from the center of the forest. The golden leaves on the fortune tree didn't just fall. They disintegrated into a foul black ash. The rot wasn't a poison. It was a cure. It was restoring the natural cycle of death and rebirth, stripping away the artificial, cursed immortality of the gold. The transformation was violent. In the city, the luck Marcus Vane had relied on vanished. His stock prices, which had been artificially inflated by the forest's influence, plummeted 70% in 60 seconds. But the real revelation was the human one. As the tree died, the fog in the forest cleared. For the first time in a century, sunlight hit the forest floor. Marcus Vane fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Without the tree's dark energy sustaining his arrogance, he was just a man, small, terrified, and utterly alone. He looked at the workers, the press, and the witnesses, but no one moved to help him. They saw him for what he was, a hollow shell. The justice wasn't vindictive. It was natural. Marcus Vane wasn't arrested that day. He was simply ignored. His power had been an illusion, and when the illusion broke, he became invisible. Alexander, however, stood tall. He walked over to Marcus and offered him a hand. Not to pull him back to the top, but to help him off the ground. "It's over, Marcus," Alexander said quietly. "You're poor now. It's the best thing that will ever happen to you." Alara watched them from the tree-line. She felt the weight lift from her own shoulders. The golden branch she had kept in her house had turned to simple brown wood. Her farmhouse was still hers, her research was now funded by honest merit, and her land was finally at peace. She realized that revenge would have kept her tied to Alexander's old world. But by choosing to heal the forest, she had freed them both. The source of arrogance was gone, replaced by the quiet, steady hum of a forest that was allowed to be just a forest again. Alexander walked back to her. He didn't have $1 billion. He had $1,200 in a checking account and a mountain of legal debt to clear. But when he looked at Alara, his eyes were bright, clear, and full of a passion that didn't cost a cent. They walked away as the excavators were loaded back onto trailers. The town of Oakhaven would never be the same. The legend of the fortune tree would become a ghost story told to children to warn them of the price of greed. And as for Alara and Alexander, they didn't need a golden tree. They had planted something better. A future built on the truth. The confrontation is over. The gold has turned to ash, and the Titan has become a man. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Did Alexander deserve a chance at redemption, or should he have fallen with the tree? And what about Alara? Was she right to destroy the wealth that could have changed millions of lives? There's no wrong answer here. I want to hear your perspective in the comments below. The dust has finally settled, and the gold has returned to the earth, leaving behind a question that haunts every empire. Once the money is gone, who are you? 6 months after the fall of the fortune tree, the town of Oakhaven looked fundamentally different. The excavators were gone. The industrial hub project was tied up in permanent probate. But the real change was in Marcus Vane. Without the tree's influence, his downfall was swift and surgical. Within weeks, federal investigators discovered the ghost accounts he used to leverage his takeover. He didn't just lose his status. He lost his freedom. Today, Marcus sits in a minimum security facility, serving a 5-year sentence for securities fraud. He spends his days in the prison library, staring at old magazines featuring the men he used to call peers. No one visits him. In the world of the arrogant, you are only as valuable as your last win. For Alara, the rise was different. It wasn't meteoric. It was organic. Her soil restoration serum, the one born from the death of the tree, became the industry standard for environmental reclamation. She didn't become a billionaire overnight. She became something much more stable, a respected authority. She received the Global Green Innovation Award, accompanied by a grant that secured her family's land for the next century. But if you ask her, her greatest achievement isn't the trophy on her mantle. It's the fact that she can walk through the Blackwood forest and feel the wind, without hearing it whisper her name. And Alexander. His journey was the most radical. He stayed in Oakhaven. He used his remaining $5 million, the only clean money he had left, to settle the pensions of the workers Marcus Vane had tried to cheat. It left him with almost nothing. He now works as a consultant for Alara's foundation, helping small farmers navigate the complex financial world he once used to crush them. He lives in a small cottage on the edge of the woods. The man who once demanded the world's attention now finds joy in the silence of a morning fog. There was a full-circle moment recently. Alara and Alexander stood on the site where the fortune tree once stood. The ground was no longer bruised purple. It was covered in wildflowers. Alexander looked at the spot and admitted something he had never said out loud. I used to think Marcus was my enemy. I used to think the tree was my secret. But looking back, Marcus's cruelty was the greatest gift I ever received. It forced me to see the monster I was becoming. Alara took his hand, her fingers interlaced with his. We all have a forest inside us, Alexander. Some of us just get lost in it longer than others. They are no longer a billionaire and a beggar. They are two people who survived a war of spirits. Their relationship isn't a headline in a gossip rag. It's a quiet partnership built on shared scars and a mutual respect for the things that cannot be bought. Looking back at this journey, the lesson is clear. Arrogance is a debt that always collects. We spend so much of our lives chasing the fortune tree, convinced that if we just had enough, we would be untouchable. But the only thing that makes us untouchable is integrity. Alara didn't win because she found a shortcut. She won because she refused to take one. Alexander didn't find peace by climbing higher. He found it by letting go. Today, Sterling Global is a defunct name in a textbook. Lead Vance Holdings is a cautionary tale for MBA students. But the Vance Research Center is thriving. Alara is currently working on a project to reforest depleted regions in sub-Saharan Africa. Alexander is by her side, finally using his brilliant mind to build something that will outlive him. They aren't the richest people in the world by the bank standards. But they are the only ones who can sleep through the night without fear of what the morning will bring. This story ends not with a bank balance, but with a sunset over a healthy forest. We've seen the rise, the fall, and the slow, painful beauty of redemption. Looking at where everyone ended up, Marcus in a cell, Alara in the sun, and Alexander in the quiet. Do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of the choices we make when we think no one is watching? I want to hear what you think in the comments. Your perspective on this story means everything to me. Thank you for staying with me through this 170-minute journey. If this story touched you or made you rethink what fortune really means, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of the powerful and the resilient. In the end, the most valuable thing you can own is a version of yourself that you actually respect when the lights go out. We spent nearly 3 hours tracing the rise and fall of the Sterling Empire and the quiet, fierce resilience of Alara Vance. But looking back, this story isn't really about a billionaire's bank account or a botanist's miracle. It's about the invisible architecture of our lives, our character, We often confuse net worth with self-worth. We look at people like the old Alexander Sterling and assume their arrogance is a shield, when in reality, it's a symptom of a deep, starving insecurity. True wealth isn't what you can buy. It's what you have left after you lose everything you've bought. If Alara has learned one thing, it's that justice doesn't come from a gavel or a revenge plot. It comes from outgrowing your enemies. While Marcus Vane sat in a cell ruminating on his losses, Alara was busy building a life that didn't require his downfall to feel complete. I used to think my success was about saving my farm, she recently shared during a keynote. But I realized that success was actually about refusing to let my circumstances turn me into someone I didn't like. What about the legacy they leave behind? Think about the children in Oakhaven who watched this play out. They didn't just see a corporate war. They saw a lesson in generational healing. They saw that you don't have to accept a curse just because your father did. The promise of the future is no longer tied to a golden tree. It's tied to the idea that hardship isn't a dead end. It's a training ground. The next generation in this town won't measure success by the height of their towers, but by the depth of their integrity. When we look at Marcus Vane today, there is no bitterness. There is no triumph in his misery. There is only a measured understanding. He wasn't a villain in a movie. He was a man who made a series of choices that determined his destiny. He chose the shadow, and he ended up in the dark. Alexander chose the light, even though it meant starting over with nothing. The universe didn't punish Marcus. It simply gave him the world he spent his life building. The advice Alara would give you today is simple. Protect your peace as fiercely as you protect your dreams. Don't measure your progress by someone else's ruler. If you are struggling right now, if you feel like you're in your own evil forest, remember that the most resilient trees grow in the most difficult soil. The transformation you're going through isn't meant to break you. It's meant to strip away everything that isn't really you. As we close this chapter, I want you to take a moment to reflect on your own fortune tree. What are you sacrificing for the things you want? Is the price of your ambition costing you your empathy? True success is the ability to look at your reflection and see a person of integrity. It's the ability to lose $1 billion and realize you've actually gained your life. It's the power of loving yourself enough to walk away from a golden cage. The story of the Iron Titan and the botanist is over, but your story is still being written. We've seen that the source of arrogance is always a lie, and the source of true strength is always the truth. Looking at where everyone ended up, do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of the choices we make every single day? I want to hear your final thoughts in the comments below. This journey has been incredible. Thank you for your time, your engagement, and for being part of this community. If you found value in these lessons, hit that like button and share this video with someone who's currently navigating their own forest. The story of the billionaire and the botanist reminds us that the greatest empires aren't built on land, but on the quiet choices we make when the world isn't watching. Over the last 3 hours, we've watched a massive transformation unfold. We saw Alexander Sterling, a man who thought he was a god, realize he was just a prisoner of his own greed. We saw Alara, a woman who had every reason to be bitter, choose to be the light that burned the darkness away. From that first explosive meeting in the mud to the final shattering collapse of the fortune tree, we've witnessed a profound truth. Success that requires you to sacrifice your humanity is just a high-end form of failure. What makes this story significant isn't the gold or the skyscrapers. It's the moment Alexander realized he'd rather have $1,000 and his soul back than 40 billion and a heart of stone. It matters because we all have our own fortune trees. Those shortcuts or temptations that promise us everything but cost us our peace. This story offers hope. It proves that no matter how far you've fallen, and no matter how much you've lost, redemption is always one honest choice away. As you return to your own life after this video, I want you to take Alara's resilience with you. Remember that her worth wasn't defined by her bank account when she was broke, and it wasn't defined by the tree's gold when she was rich. Her worth was in her hands, in her ability to nurture life where others only saw profit. Your circumstances are just the soil. What you choose to plant in that soil is what determines your legacy. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience and success, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights are what make this community so special. Whether you related more to Alexander's fall or Alara's rise, your perspective helps others find their way out of their own Blackwood forest. Remember, you are not defined by what others think of you. You are defined by how you respond when life tests you. Alara and Alexander proved that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so beautiful that your critics become irrelevant. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that you're nothing. You are everything you choose to become. I am the Story Keeper.